For my previous video, I showed how to save multiple levels of associated data by hitting an endpoint that included a data array and how to save all that information to the database. For this video, what I'd like to do is make an edit form that not only includes one level of data or one entity, but multiple levels and multiple different entities, and then saving and editing that in the database. So to get started, what I thought I would do is make a change to the migration, the database migration, so that we don't have a whole heap of unnecessary fields that don't add to our understanding of doing this. So I'm just going to comment out everything that's not absolutely necessary, and what we're going to be left with is simply the name fields for these three different levels: devices, modules, and ports. Now, one thing that you might find is that if everything's named name in a database, like each table has a name, then it becomes difficult when CakePHP automatically assigns names and labels to controls, because everything will be named name. So what I'm going to do here is just give these a sort of more hierarchical name, so it's a bit more explicit that it's going to be a device or a module, and I'm going to leave the port name the same, just so to show another way of handling when you need to display custom names to the user in form fields. So we've changed our migration. Now what we'd like to do is just go Cake Migrations, and we're going to roll back. So just rolling back basically reverses the create statements and deletes the tables, and then let's migrate forward, which will then of course create the tables. So after doing that, we need to bake all, because everything's changed. So we'll just bake our devices, we'll bake our modules, and we'll bake our ports. And now that we've done that, we should be left with an empty database. Now we'd like to go and add, use that previous save associated action that we had to add a number of records to the database. But because we've just baked everything, we've overwritten it, and so I'm going back into my version control and just copying this method back into the controller that's just been rewritten. Now I've just got to make sure that my imports are correct, and as you can see, we've renamed some of these name fields, so we need to do the same thing here. So this is going to be device name, this will be module name, and we're leaving port name the same. So now what we need to do is add a record to our database using that endpoint, and as you can see, it's added that record nicely for us, and the number of records in a hierarchy. So that record is just here in our device index view. Now we need to add a link so that we can start to build a form that's going to be starting off the same as this edit device form, but it will end up having all the levels of entities in it, and to be able to be edited. So now we need to go to we might just Control KW, close it all, go to devices and the index view, and we know that we want to duplicate a lot of the edit functionality, so I'm just going to make that there into a new one, and we have a view here, so we want to change that as well, so adding, and we might close this and so we've now got an edit associated link, and if you follow the error messages you'll know what to do next. So we need to add an edit associated action in our controller. So we need to open up our devices controller and go to the bottom again, and to create an edit associated action, I'm just going to copy the boilerplate code from the edit action, and now we've got that nicely added there. So once again, going to try and hit it again, and this time we can see that we need to create a template. So let's get the name of that template there, and then we can go templates, devices, and copy the edit template to the edit associated template, and now we should have the basis of our multi-level entity editing form. Now the first challenge that we've got, if we have a look at what's currently being passed by the default edit associated method, is that we don't have all levels of our entities, related entities, available to us. So let's specify that, and we can do that by, let's create this, and we say modules, and we want modules ports. Now, sorry, associated. So what we're doing there is we're just assigning our relationships that we want to get from the database to this associated one, because there's two things that we want to do, and we certainly, I'm just going to simulate errors from here, but this is going to be needed later as we go through. So now that we've done that, if we go edit associated and have a look at the view variable device, we can see that we now have exactly what we need to loop through and display on our form. There's something here that is worth mentioning, is just this thing. It says you can overwrite the nesting limit, and you can do that by going into the application SRC. So at the moment you can see that you've reached your nesting limit and it's empty. These ports entities are empty, but we might want to display those as well. So we can say configure write, and then just change the nesting depth for this debug kit plugin, and that will then give us obviously more depth there, so that we can view everything as we'd like. So now that we've done that, we have to work on displaying all these related records. So we're going into our edit associated template, and we're going to PHP for each, and we want to loop through the device modules property, and we want to assign the key of that modules array as a variable and also the module entities as well. And then we want to end for each. And once we've done that, we also want to do the same thing for each module, because it has a child property called ports, and we want to assign each array key to a p key variable and the port entity to a variable as well. So next step is we sort of need to know how to display these related records. Now looking at our variable here, it gives us a hint. So it's basically we're building a path. So we want modules, the array key value, and then the entity's field name that we want. So it's modules 0 module name. Let's do that. So we copy an existing control form control method, and we're going to use this double quotes string interpolation thing. And so what we need is module name for this, and then we want to do the same thing for ports, and we know that we have to go further, and it's going to be ports, the key, and then the name of the field as well. So that's here. So we go ports and then p key. In this case we haven't changed the name of the ports field as well. So now when we reload, we can see that we've got everything there, and here we're coming up against our generic naming problem. So the port name in the database is simply name, but we might want to display it to the user as port name. So to do that, we just add an options array and just say label equals port name, and from there we have exactly what we need to change the name. Now something that's nice to do is to make some visual difference so that we know we're nesting something. So I'm just going to add a div for each one of the these loops, so that we can grab some styling. So created those divs. Now we need to just get to the CSS, and this is just the default cakes.css file. And now when we've done that, we've applied styling to those divs, we can see it's fairly obvious the nesting involved now. Now I'm sorry if those colors are terrible. My apologies, but I am colorblind. So when we now go to submit, what's going to happen? Well, let's try it. So we've done it, and then we hit edit associated, but what's happened is we had one module and now it's added another module, and the reason for that is that if you if we do that again, let's do it once more time. Once you can see that we're continuing to add modules, and the reason for that is if we don't specify an ID field, it will just assume it's going to be a new record. It's not an update, it's an add, or it's a new record. So what I'm going to do now is just add our ID keys into this form for both the modules records and for the ports record. And now that is done, it should work a lot better. So I'm going to now hit submit again, and let's see what happens. And for some reason we've blown away our ports, they're no longer linked. Now there's a reason for that, and that's why I've said I was going to do something later with this. So in our patch entity, by default, patch entity will only patch, I think it's the top level. It won't include all the related records that are coming across in the post. So what we need to do here is we need to, and we can do it a number of ways. You can do that, but to make it more obvious, associated and then associated. So now we're basically saying when you patch, make sure you include these two levels of associations in the patch and commit them to the database as well, please. So now we've done that, we should now be able to look at our next challenge, which is adding records that are linked to their parents using form prefilling. So what we're going to do is add a port record and look at how we could achieve that with the ability to pre-fill the module that it's related to. So let's do that now. So we're going to grab from our module here this code, and let's go to our edit associated, and we're going to put a new module link at the top of our modules area. And we know that if we're not in the modules controller, if we're not requesting from the module controller, we need to specify the controller. So we need to add that, and we want to get rid of the styling there. Now for this to work, what we'd like to do, actually we're going to, well, I said we're going to add a new part, but port, sorry, but we'll add the module here. So let's do that. So what we'll do is we'll say for each new module we want to link it to a device, and the device is, the device ID is available from our device variable here. So we've got that as a new module. Let's now do the port one that I said we were going to do. So new port, and this one's ports, and we know that port is a child of modules, so we want to connect, in this case we want to specify that it's going to link to the module. So here we have our two new links, a new module and new port, and when we press enter we should now see that we've got our new buttons here. Now we're going to use two different types of pre-fill. So with our new module button, what we're going to do is we're going to link our device to this field here. We're going to pre-fill this device and have it pre-selected. And with our ports, we're going to pre-fill our module, or link to the module properly. Now I've noticed a problem there. Can you see that the same problem is that when I click on new module, devices are empty, and when I click on new port, obviously modules are empty. So why is that happening? Well, this will bite you quite regularly if you've made manual changes to things. So how can we fix this? So we're going to into src model table, and just have a look at the problem here, and we can have a look at the migration. If we have a look at this create tables migration, notice that we've made changes to device name and module name, and we've left port name the same. So what we're seeing is that the bake command from Cake is not working, or it hasn't auto completed the display field. It's just assumed it was named. So we now need to go in and say, okay, the display field for devices, the devices table is device name, and for the modules table, it's module name, and for ports we've left it the same so it can stay the same. Now before we go too much into things, we'll just double check that if we don't have other problems. So I'm just going to go view here. So we have an error message there, so devices view. Devices view, let's go devices view. So let's have a look at what possibly can be the problem. Generally, controller factory, controller render. Syntax error. So we could have a problem with devices view. Let's see if, yeah, can you see that? It's just got an extra comma. So let's double check here. Go up one level. Right, so we have a problem here that we baked all new templates, but unfortunately Cake hasn't fully understood, or it just hasn't auto completed correctly. So what we need to do now is we need to go, we're in models view, so we can go and have a look at the problem in that thing, models view, and notice here that we've got module name here. So that should be module underscore name, and here this device should be device underscore name. So one way of fixing that is to do a find and replace. Sorry, it should be device underscore name, and then once you do that, pretty much, let's just do a search, make sure that we've got everything. Yeah, so the only ones that are left are ports, which we didn't change, so that's good. And now let's have a look when we review this. Now it's correct. So going back to devices, back to edit associated, and we're still looking at new module and new port, and we're trying to pass a selection through to make sure that we can previously select a device or another or pre-fill a form. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to go devices, save associated. I'm going to add another record here so that we can device 2. So we've got 2 devices that we can look to. So we're going to say here that we want to add a new module, and when we click new module, we want it correctly to select the correct device. Now there's two different methods of doing this. Let's have a look at them. So we're adding a module, so we want to look at the modules controller, and we know that we're passing to this a query string, so let's grab hold of that. So we want to say device ID equals this request get query, and the device we're linking it to is being passed in that query string. Now once that's been taken there, we have an issue here if this get query doesn't get anything. What will happen, it will return null by default, and that will cause issues later on. So what I'm going to do, if we're looking for a device in the database, no ID field will ever be 0. So I'm saying if this is not set it to 0, and even if you search for 0, you won't find that record anyway, so it'll always be correctly false. So if we say this, if we go if this, and we go modules and devices exists, and then it's saying give me an array of conditions. So if the ID equals device ID, then this is one way of pre-filling data. Just set our new empty entity to have a device ID of what we've passed through. So if it exists, do that. Okay, so let's have a look. Does it work? So if we change the query string, we can see that it does. So now we're pre-selecting data based on what we've clicked on in the other screen. So that's one way of doing it. Now there's another way of doing this as well. So we'll look at that method, and that method is basically we set a variable, so selected device equals, let's set that to null. And the other option here is instead of assigning it to the module entity, we can now go, if that does exist, just set that device ID to that, and then go here and say selected device, pass it through to the view, and it's the modules add view. So let's go on. And so instead of us doing that at the entity level, we can say just set the value to the selected device. Now does that do the same thing as what we have done before? Let's have a look, and you can see that you can do that at that level as well, and that really works nicely. And that's for a single select. You can see that that's working very much the way it should. So new module, and let's connect a couple of ports to it, and now we're coming up against a database error, and it's saying when it's inserting modules into modules ports table, these two values to link module and port together, it's saying that it can't find any data to put in this extra data field, and therefore there's a constraint violation. So let's fix that. So we'll go up to our migration, and we can see in our modules ports table that we have a field here called extra data, but what we are coming up against is the way this is defined, it's always expecting to have a value passed to it, and it just blows up if it doesn't. So what we can do is we can go back to here and go bin cake migrations, actually bake migration, and we want to alter the modules ports table, and let's just delete all this other stuff. We'll make it into a one-liner, change the column, and let's paste in what we've already got. And then we want to say, I want to make this column nullable, and if there's no value passed, I'm happy for the database engine to substitute a default value of null. And then finally, let's just have a look at our status and then migrate, and we've done the migration there. So now if we go back one step and then try and submit to the database, it works successfully, and we can now start to look at adding a new port. Now with the new module, we were using a certain way to pre-select our device, but with new port it's slightly different. So when we look at new port, we find that we want to pre-select, it's a multi-select, so I can actually select multi because it's a many-to-many relationship. So we're now got to try and figure out how to link our new port to this module and get this to be pre-selected. So let's have a look at that now. So let's go to ports controller and the add method. So we'll close our ports controller and the add method, and we know that we're trying to connect the port to the module, so we're looking for a module ID, and again it's the same get query, and once we have that, we again have two different ways of doing this, but it's slightly different. So we'll do the entity style first. So we want to check, we want to say if that's going to be empty, just give me 0, and let's go ports and then modules. If the module ID exists, then I want you to do the following. I want you to get hold of the module, so this ports modules get, and pass in the module ID, and then I want you to assign it to the modules property, which we're just going to make a deliberate mistake here. So what we're wanting to do is pre-fill the connection between port and module. So we're adding here, we're adding module 1, but as you can see it hasn't selected any of these modules. Now the reason for that, and this can catch people out, is that port and modules have a many-to-many relationship, but at the moment I'm saying in the way this is configured, I'm saying that the port has one module because it's directly connected to that module property. So we need to wrap any entities that are underneath modules in an array so that the many-to-many, or the one-to-many in this case, relationship is understandable by CakePHP. So all I need to do here is just do that, and then watch what happens with the pre-filling. It's now working. So I've got my new port, and now we've got our port being saved by, and we've got our new port being added there. Now it's pretty simple, that what we're doing, but it's got its gotchas. Now let's have a look at the other way of doing this pre-filling with this multi select. So we again are getting this module. We're again going to check whether it's, but this time it's going to be selected module, and it's going to be an empty array. And then if it does exist, we're going to say selected module is that value, but the module ID. So then we want to pass that through to our view, and we want to go to the ports add template and add a value of selected module. Now does that work? So let's have a look. Oh, actually I'm doing the wrong thing, aren't I? So we're looking at ports at the moment. Sorry, I got myself confused. So let's go here, and we want to go new port. If we change the module it's being linked to, we can see it changes. So there are two methods. We've got the entity style, and then we've got the control pre-fill style as well for pre-filling forms in CakePHP. So now we've given ourselves the ability to add modules and ports. Now let's look at deleting. Now deleting is quite interesting. Here we have in our template here, we've got a delete, giving us the option to delete the device. And notice what this delete button has. It's got a href, an A tag, and some JavaScript code, and then it says if you say yes, it then wants us to post this form. So if I copy that string, notice that we've got a form side by side with it, and that is going to submit that form to the server, and it's going to post value to the delete method on the server. So let's go into our edit associated and go up and copy our postLink here, and we'll go underneath the module name, and we want to be able to delete that module. So we change this to be delete the module, and we get rid of the side nav item class, and that gives us code that we need to delete our module. And now we want to be able to delete our port. So, and I've just noticed I've made a mistake there, so I need to definitely specify the correct controller, and this one will be port, and this one again will be port. And what we want to do is make sure that our delete module has the same change on it. So controller is modules controller. So when we reload our multi-level form and we go into this delete module, we can see that, like the other delete button which is here, it's already created an A tag with a bit of JavaScript pointing at a form. But if I copy that form name and press enter to search, no companion form has been discovered. So we look at this one, and this next one we're looking at the same thing but just another one, and it seems that we've got another one here, but this one seems to have created, look at this one seems to have created the extra form that's supposed to go side by side, and so it's kind of random whether it's done right. But there is an even greater problem, is that you cannot have nested forms. So the way the postlink's working now, it's nested inside the main form and it will never reliably submit. So if we have a look at the CakePHP documentation, there's a workaround for this, and it says when you're creating a postlink, you can set a block option, and that will allow you to add the form to the postlink block or to whichever custom block name you set. So let's look at doing that. So we're going to go into here and we're going to say block equals true, and that's our delete module one. Let's go find our delete port option as well, because it's the same problem with all of them. Now when we do that, you'd think, oh, that will work, but there is another problem here, and if we go to inspect our module here, it's now not creating nested forms, but there are no forms listed anywhere else. So we're missing the forms that should go along with each paste link that we should have. So why is that? Well, by default, if you set block equals true, it will look to insert the forms, append the forms into a block named postlink. And if you look at the layout that comes with Cake, we've got a number of different blocks like content, script, fetch, CSS and meta, but there's no postlink block. So we can get around that by, I'll just copy it from here. It could be in your layout, it could be anywhere really, but right, so now we've defined a postlink block, and now if I reload and scroll to the bottom, I can see that now it's successfully added all the different postlink forms in, and now we should be able to delete successfully our different items. So we can choose to delete a port, go OK, go back to our form. We could choose to delete this module. Let's delete this module. Go back to our form, delete this module, and got a couple of modules there, and so let's delete everything. And now we can see that we've got the ability to add and see it's already pre-selected here, and go back to our and go back, and we can see that we now have the ability to add, delete our associated records, and to modify all the records that we have. And we now have a multi-level edit associated record form finished. Now, I hope that this video is helpful to someone.